Does your furry friend take over your bed every night? It's time to reclaim your space while giving them the comfort they deserve with the coldest, cozy dog bed. Don't wait. Check out the link in the video description to buy now on Amazon.
Britain will restart funding for the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, the Foreign Secretary announced today. In a statement to Parliament, David Lammy said he was lifting a pause on sending UK cash to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine, UNRWA. He told MPs that Britain would provide a fresh injection of £21 million to UNRWA for their work in Gaza, with some cash to support management reforms. The UK, along with the US and other Western nations, had paused funding for UNRWA in January. It followed claims a dozen of its staff were involved in the Hamas terror attacks on Israel on October 7. But Israel was criticized for failing to provide evidence for its allegations against UNRWA workers. Mr. Lammy told the House of Commons he had been reassured by an independent review into what UNRWA was doing to ensure its neutrality. In the 9 months since the October 7 attacks, Israel has killed more than 38,600 people in the region, according to the Gazan Health Ministry. The war has created a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, displaced most of its 2.3 million population and triggered widespread hunger. UNRWA, which is the only UN agency dedicated to helping refugees from a specific region or conflict, faced allegations that 12 of their staff were involved in the October 7 attacks on southern Israel that killed 1,200 people. Catherine Colonna, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of France, led an independent review group to assess whether UNRWA is doing everything within its power to ensure neutrality. The review found that UNRWA has in place a significant number of mechanisms and procedures to ensure compliance with the humanitarian principle of neutrality, adding that they probably have a more developed system than other UN organizations and agencies. The report did add that there is always room for improvement and issues related to neutrality persist. Mr. Lammy told the Commons this morning, "Humanitarian aid is a moral necessity in the face of such a catastrophe, and it is aid agencies who ensure UK support reaches civilians on the ground. UNRWA is absolutely central to these efforts. No other agency can deliver aid at the scale needed. It's already feeding over half of Gaza's population. It will be vital for future reconstruction, and it provides critical services to Palestinian refugees in the region." I was appalled by the allegations that UNRWA staff were involved in the 7th of October attacks. But the UN took these allegations seriously. I've spoken to UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres and Commissioner Philippe Lazzarini. We are reassured that after Catherine Colonna's independent review, UNRWA is ensuring they meet the highest standards of neutrality and strengthening its procedures, including unfettered. UNRWA has acted. Partners like Japan, the European Union and Norway have also now acted. This government will act too. I can confirm to the House that we are overturning the suspension of UNRWA funding. Britain will provide £21 million in new funds, some directed at supporting the management reforms recommended by the Colonna Review, and UNRWA supports more than 5.5 million Palestinians. Almost 200 of their staff have died through this conflict. I thank them for this life-saving work. Tory MP Richard Holden, the party's former chairman, asked Mr. Lammy whether he could give British taxpayers unequivocal assurance that Hamas has no links to UNRWA in Gaza. He told the Commons he was concerned by Labour's decision to resume funding for the aid body, saying, UNRWA schools have been repeatedly used by terrorists to both store weapons and launch attacks, and over 100 UNRWA staff have had links to terrorist groups in the region. Mr. Lammy replied, I had the pleasure of meeting Catherine Colonna in her role as the Foreign Secretary for France. She's a woman of tremendous capability and integrity. She looked at these issues in depth, she reported, and all of our allies have continued to fund UNRWA. But she did make a series of recommendations and, of course, that is why I spoke to the UN Secretary-General, to ensure they are implementing the action plan that came out as a consequence of that review. Mr. Lammy's decision to restore UK funding for UNRWA came as Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is facing the threat of a Commons revolt over his stance on the Gaza CRI.